and welcome to this VIP webinar event with Victor Paterno. I'm your host, Casey Brandt, as Standards Coordinator for Conexxus. So a little bit about what we're going to go through today. I've got some housekeeping things, a little bit of information about Conexxus. We're going to introduce Gray and Victor, and they're going to have their fireside chat. One thing you might notice about today that's a little bit different is we don't have a Q&A on the agenda. Since Victor and Gray are traveling and they have a bit of a time difference, we're not going to be able to do a question and answer today. But if you do have questions for either Gray or Victor, feel free to contact us at info@conexxus.org and we'll make sure they get to them. So a little bit of housekeeping today. This webinar is being recorded and will be available on demand afterwards. And some of our webinars are able to be PCI continuing education credits, so just contact us if you're interested and to see if a webinar applies. This is a little bit of a disclaimer. This is a slide that our lawyers make us put in, just that the views and opinions of the speakers are solely of the speakers and not Conexxus. A huge thank you and shout out to our 2023 annual sponsors at Conexxus. The extra support is really appreciated and allows us to continue the work that we do on behalf of the industry. I just want to let you know that 2024 sponsorships are open, so contact us if you're interested. So Conexxus is a nonprofit technology organization. Our members really do the heavy lifting. We provide a neutral forum where retailers and vendors can work together to create standards and solutions that are beneficial to our industry. We educate through white papers and events like this one at Conexxus365, and we advocate on a technical level at other organizations to help steer the conversation and standards and policies so that changes in the industry don't negatively affect your business. And Conexxus365 is an educational webinar series. We have monthly webinars, so make sure you're on our email list so that way or check the website to be notified of future webinars. We will be having quarterly webinars on Connect with Conexxus, where you can talk with the Conexxus staff, answer any questions you have as well. That one's always very beneficial as well. Make sure that you look for us on LinkedIn at conexxus.org. And if you have any questions, again, there's our email right there. All right, now I'm going to turn it over to Gray to introduce Victor and get started.
Thanks a lot, Casey. I'd like to welcome Victor Paterno. He is President and CEO of 7-Eleven Philippines, and I've had the privilege of getting to know him over the last couple of years with his engagement with the NACS Board of Directors and now the NACS Executive Committee of the Board of Directors, all from the Philippines, which means that it's either early morning for me or late at night for Victor at this point. We're about 12 hours difference. Victor, welcome. Nice to have you.
Thanks, Trey. It's good to see you.
Well,
always.
So
a long time.
Yeah, I think it's been all about 7 days.
Yeah.
But we had a great opportunity to catch up at the XCOM strategy retreat about 10 days ago. And I wanted to start with, which is to me is always a fascinating question. How did you get into this business?
Well, I graduated dating myself, but you're older than me, so I graduated in the early 90s. And, we actually worked in the US for a while. And then came home wanting to be an entrepreneur and saying, corporate life is not for me. And my dad said, well, why don't you help me out? I was an engineer, mechanical engineer. Said, well, I need help building stores. So, like, okay. We had 40 stores at the time, and we needed to get to 100 for an IPO. So I said I'd help him with that, and one thing led to another, and I ended up staying a little longer than I should have, but I did leave shortly after the IPO. It's a father-son thing. You can look at my speech if you want to see that touchy-feely stuff. But and then I got and then I started a payments company, a payment gateway. Think of it like a Pay Near Me, I think, is equivalent, I think, in the US. Except in the Philippines, cash is like 90 plus percent of transactions. For us, it's much higher. This was not a niche player. It eventually got sold to a telco 2019. But anyway, I started in 2000, the dot-com bubble. We IPO'd in 1998, but it's an act of timing. And in 2004, the company had a multinational had acquired a majority stake, and after running it for a few years, said they needed to localize management and asked if I would come back. And I was thinking at that time, well, okay, it's going to be hard to raise funding for this platform. It's not going to be a quick flip exit. So, and they told me, well, why don't you just build out the stores and that's your platform? So I said, really? Okay, will I be able to do that? So a few thousand. Okay, well, what's faster, waiting out the dot-com bust or building a few thousand? It turned out about the same. Well, when it was sold in 2019, we had about 2,500 stores. Yeah. And so and that's how I got into it. And that's you can segue into all of that. That's why I joined the Expo.
So now you have what? You have about 3,800 stores?
Yes, close to that, yeah.
So you guys have gone from 100 in the mid 90s to 3,800 by 2023 last year, which to me is just an incredible growth speed. Tell us a little bit about the Philippine market, because it's a little bit unique from the United States in its geography.
Yes, we have 7,100 islands, and it's you basically have two islands in the north and the south, but half of the people live where I live in the main island in the north. But the supply chain is really complex, and in Asia, I think I touched on this speech. The supply chains are what drive consolidation. So in Asia, it's usually a two-player market. Japan, maybe four. But in the Philippines, we're 70% market share because of that integrated supply chain. So I compare this to the US. It's super fragmented. The largest player is 10%. Because of that geographical, it's a big country.
Yeah. And one of the things that struck me when we first met was your use of supply chain logistics as really a critical tool, and the data that you were passing back and forth. You now are the second largest retailer in the Philippines.
No, not really. The supermarkets are still bigger, but we are the largest by convenience.
Okay. So how do you view your stores? I mean, I think that's a little bit different from the United States. You've used the term delivery points, which, in the US, it's like, no, we sell gasoline and we sell, items within the store. But what struck me about your strategy is you're looking at the stores as this vast distribution network. Again, the endpoint of logistics. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Well, if you think about moving goods close to the consumer, they're manufactured in a factory, and they have to get into the consumer's hand somehow. How do they get there? Consolidated distribution is the most efficient way to do it. You don't really want each. I mean, we started that way. When we had like 10 stores, we didn't have a warehouse, so each supplier would drop off. And we've done the math, and basically, if you did that, instead of having 2,500 products, you'd have 500 in the Philippines at least, because our stores are about 120 square meters. So basically, you have these full cases sitting around. No manufacturer would drop off just one case, etc.
Right.
So
right.
yeah, I mean, we're the endpoints of a pipe. That's the way we think about it, and that's why the consolidation.
Got it. So let's go back to your payments background, which seems to be a constant theme going through your career here. You're doing some very innovative things from a financial services perspective, which to me is on a large scale something that's both beneficial financially to you, but also incredibly socially beneficial to your customer base. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, we started payments started really growing in the early 2010s, and we're doing about 100 transactions a day per store today. The volume, the GMV, if you will, of that, or TPV, is 5x our sales. So that has enabled downstream things like recycling ATMs, a place to put the cash. And the next iteration has been like selling, making that data available for financial inclusion. Only 3% of people in the Philippines have a credit card, so there's a big market out there. The national ID is coming out. All these digi banks have come in hungry. They know what they're doing, really sharp, but there's no data, and we actually have data on 40 million unique mobile phone numbers with permission to share and permission to contact. So basically, we work with these guys and try to get customers into the financial system.
So you're using a unique KYC method that may be a little bit foreign to us. How do you leverage your store personnel to help you with the KYC issue that enables this financial inclusion?
Well, we'll get there. You need a bit of scale to do that. I think my philosophy is that if you can't run 2 transactions per day per store of something, it's not going to get done right. So it's early days. We hope to get there in about a year, where we will be having 8,000, 10,000 loan transactions a day, enough for people to get used to the KYC process. But we envision, and the lenders have also told us that they would want our clerks involved in not just KYC, but vetting the customer. The model here is they sit around waiting for you to buy an appliance. One of the people comes and offers you a loan. And they've found that the repayment rates on a face-to-face transaction versus an online transaction, it's enough to pay for the cost of that person doing 2 loans a day. And when I tell them, look, our people see these people like every week, every day sometimes, they're going to do a lot better than your guy sitting at the appliance store. And when the clerk when he doesn't pay, and maybe the clerk's incentives are cribbed, well, he's going to be a little shy a little embarrassed going into the store. So,
so you're using social
I believe there could be a win-win for the clerks, for us, maybe for the banks.
Because I mean, you're driving usurious rates down on these loans from loan sharks to more of a industrial.
Well, we're just providing a market. The banks are doing it, but yes, providing a platform.
Well, yeah, and let's talk a little bit about platforms, because we've had lots of conversations about what's happening in the United States. So let's move to the United States. Let's go halfway around the world. And you've been working with a lot of the executives in this industry for quite a long time. You went to Lehigh for more than a few years and graduated. What do you see as the biggest challenge for our industry as of now?
In the US, well, it's obvious. I think payments are one. You have credit card, you're paying out more than half your profits in fees. We actually make money from the financial companies. They don't make money from us. That's probably the biggest, but it's kind of just there. I think NACS is doing its best to lobby against it, but it's an uphill battle. And I think the greatest threats, I guess, would be that you're selling most of you're selling gas. I mean, so much of your income comes from gas, and what is going to happen? EVs. That's a longer term pretty big threat. But from a technology standpoint, you know, I do think that you know, when you have a fragmented industry, somebody's going to want to consolidate. It's just the way the world works. It's been very difficult in the US because, you know, logistics would be a natural for us. Logistics would be a natural way to consolidate. Because if you're not connected to my logistics system, you have a part of the items. But that's not going to work in the US outside of like regional players. So I guess the next would be technology. And where would that happen? And yeah, I think age verification could be one, depending on where it goes. I'm less familiar with the regulatory angles behind all of this, but yeah, somebody's work. Of course, everybody's looking at the size of this industry and how fragmented it is and saying, deep pocketed guy can come in and roll it up. And that's valuable. It's very hard to replicate a store footprint. We've always said, I don't care if Amazon comes here. I don't care how much money they have to expand one store at a time. You go too fast, the landlords will know it and you pay through the nose.
Right.
Right? And meanwhile, we'll have snapped up the best sites. It's very hard to do expanding. So yeah, I think that would be you know more than I greatest threats.
So I'm in your case where you own the majority of the footprint, and I think we've also got some large folks here with gasoline, you know, with petroleum energy being at risk.
Yeah, we have no gas, by the way.
Yeah.
Say that.
Yeah. Well, you guys have, I think you only have 30 locations and it's co-branded with somebody. It's not your gas.
Yeah, we don't operate in gas stations.
Right. The seems to me that delivering services to the point of sale, and most of these coming across as digital, even though we only have like 7% of the population that's decidedly unbanked, but delivering those services might be something that we should be looking at that justifies our locational footprint, which I think is a challenge going forward. How do we justify the 150,000 stores we have that were based on gasoline delivery?
Yes, I think you know, having real estate close to the customer is always valuable. Not long ago, dark stores were a big thing. You know, caching inventory close to the customers with Amazon. And this is the closest you get in the United States to being close to the customer. So, what are the other use cases of having 2,000 people around? How much more deeply can you penetrate that? And you know, to go off on like a non-technical tangent, one of the things we are doing is selling more essentials. So in I give you in Indonesia, 70% of FMCG goes through the market goes through 2 chains, and they're mini marts. So okay, probably won't happen in the US in that way, but people are shopping close to home. Talk to any market. And I think convenience stores, those of us, myself included, following the classic convenience model of selling chips and drinks at high prices. You can look at that and see that less incremental sales.
Yeah.
And the most profitable convenience operators in the world follow that.
Yeah.
And
so you brought up FMCGs, and that's one of the things that we've been talking about quite a bit with, especially with the bringing of 8112s to the marketplace. NACS has invested quite a bit of time and effort in this. How do you feel that 8112s is going to change the relationship between the consumer, the store, and the FMCG?
I think that depends. 8112s by themselves are a great way to combat fraud, reduce friction. Um, you don't have to print out your coupons on newspaper. But other than that, they're the same thing. If they're what I call blind, you don't know who's going to get them. But if they were to be used in a targeted manner, that's a different value proposition. Yeah, because a targeted coupon, the conventional wisdom, because nobody's really sure, is 10x more valuable than a blind coupon.
Mhm.
If you are a marketer and you want to issue this coupon because you're launching a new product and you want to get in the hands of people who buy that category and are likely to buy it. The cost of customer acquisition for an FMCG in the US is $20 for new products. So, but you would be willing to pay quite a bit to acquire that loyal customer, but you have to know that that person was a loyal customer and not an existing customer, because you'd be cannibalizing yourself. You'd get somebody who bought the category but was buying a competitor. Who would have that data? Well, the retailer would, presuming he's got a loyalty program. Captures that.
Yeah, so there may be a new role for convenience stores in there, which is customer acquisition, whereas the grocery stores have always been there. And I guess what I'm hearing from you is there's a pretty wide revenue stream there that we should be taking advantage of, 8112s being that way of getting there.
So if you ask like Nielsen again, the smaller stores are seen as a place for discovery of new products, which makes sense. You're not running your refilling trip. You're browsing around. I mean, we're quite the launch pad for male health and beauty. And so we make a lot of money from being a customer acquisition place. But in the US, I think there's a lot of other things you have to solve, like you actually have a hard time getting new products in because you don't control your distribution system. So, and I was like, remember we were at that dinner, I was like, but why don't the distributors have tokenized distribution? I mean, tokenized inventory. I thought that's what it was. Quite surprised actually at how because it's the fragmentation.
Yeah, I mean, we were one of the cases that we were talking about was Hershey's saying, look, by the time we've spent all of our launch dollars, you guys are just getting it in the store, and Walmart's been the one that's benefited from it.
Every snacking and beverage item, I think, is launched in their stores first.
Yeah. So if we were to look at one place that we should be focusing on would be our logistics in the back door.
Yes, I think that's just I'm not sure that's a solvable problem. Really. Yeah, I think consolidating logistics. So consolidating logistics will be consolidating stores.
Okay.
It's a rollout.
Building scale. So so in your opinion, in our situation, we should probably be focusing on FMCG customer acquisition as kind of a new growth area.
Yes, I think so. I think you'll have to figure out that, we talked about it, right? There are ways to hack this. You can just order from Amazon. The manufacturer will pay the difference. It's okay. They're fine. So that you get new product on the shelf and into people's hands. And then once you prove traction, then they'll put it in for market.
So you've also made a dive into some other technologies that I find interesting. First, you've got a very successful mobile commerce platform. It's called Click. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the dynamics and why you got into that and why it's so successful?
Well, so we said, okay, we need a loyalty program because everybody has one. And, it's table stakes, right? And we said, well, okay, stable stakes, we have to spend X amount. But if everybody's going to have the app and we're going to be collecting data on people, how can we make money on top of that? So you just, well, it turns out the cost of acquisition of loyalty is really, really low. Okay, it's like 40 cents or something like that, 20 cents. And then once you put a wallet on top of that, well, okay, that's another 50 cents. Whereas, the wallet guys are paying $10, right?
Right.
And then you put in an e-commerce layer on that. Okay, that's $20. The other guys are paying 20. So, you layer all of this on top of that. I mean, once you have an app in customer hands, you just put stuff on it, so you got a super app of sorts.
So
For stuff in your store.
You brought up the term super app, and we've talked a lot about that. So effectively, well, you're also the preeminent Alipay provider down in the Philippines as well, aren't you?
We take in yes, we at one point before they integrated more fully in the banking system had most of Alipay's money flowed through our stores, cash in flowed through it.
So what you were building all along, because you've connected to these people, you've focused on customer acquisition. I think you're what, over 8 million people now on your loyalty program?
Yes.
And then once you've done that, you're looking at that as your customer acquisition, and how do you leverage it then? So you can connect to an Alipay, you can connect to a DoorDash, you can connect to all these other big players. You're the consolidator. You've created then a super app.
Well, yes. I do think though that pre-COVID we were spending a hell of a lot. I had like really crack digital team. They went on to run to head up some pretty big companies, digital companies. You bet that. But the economics of building, and I tell colleagues this for just beginning with. I've been heading down this road since 2015. And what I will tell you is, yes, it makes sense. The unit economics look fantastic. There are two problems. Problem number one, which may be a little more obvious, is your investors did not invest in a tech company. They don't want to burn. They expect to be profitable, the convenience store. Yes, but yes, the unit economics just not so compelling. It's like, why would you do it? It's like 10%. But you still have to burn. Second is that the culture of tech companies and offline retailers are totally incompatible. You're almost better having a partnering with an outsource. You are better because all the offline guys are like, well, this guy's paid so much more than I am. Let him do the work.
Mm-hmm.
So
the innovator's conundrum, which is the innovator.
Yes, it's so there's a role for somebody there, like yes, and it's I think a role for NACs.
Yeah, agreed.
Where you don't have each one building their own thing. And besides, you're only the biggest one of you is only 10%. Who's going to use it? The biggest my biggest competitor is 10% also. He doesn't have a payment system, and he owns a bank and an airline. These things. It's a scale thing, right? It's a scale thing. It's not because we're so smart. No, we're 70%. Period. And people will talk to you. You're 10%. Nobody will.
Right, and that's. But you brought up your competitor, and they own a bank, they own an airline, but they failed to consolidate those to a super app because
they're working on that now. Yes, they're working on that, but it's like they also have a supermarket, so that
right. So they don't have the footprint that you have too, so you can reach the consumers a lot easier.
Yes.
So, but the other thing when I visited your offices. I was struck by the fact that you're bringing in all kinds of raw data and you're actually doing your own data analytics and running your own key factors of success and KPIs. Tell us how you got into that side of it, because most CEOs look for somebody else to kind of do that.
Yeah, I always compare notes. I always like at a conference, I'll ask people, how much time do you guys spend visiting stores? And I will say, I was like, and many of them will say, like the bigger ones, say like half the year, like half the year. Wow, how'd you get anything done? And do you see anything that different? Is there? Because if I visited, um, even if I try to visit just 10% of the stores, that's one store a day. Uh, and yeah, okay, people would be happy that I saw them. But you know what? The franchises would be even happier if they were making more money.
Mm.
And I said, that's what I'm going to spend my time on. And so when you have a bunch of stores, you can't manage them by walking around. You have to manage them as data points. And you go into some stores to kind of see as a sample and say, okay, why is this happening? The traditional approach would be, uh, let me get my marketing manager on the phone. He's going to hear from me. But it's really like, okay, why is this happening in that store, this store? What is it in the system that's wrong, that's causing this phenomenon? And basically my philosophy with analytics and strategy. So most important bit is strategy. How fast do you grow? Where do you expand? Etc. Um, and uh, then after that, metrics is basically how you translate strategy into action. It's like, and metrics are all about picking the three. Can't have more than three. Because if you have more than three, that's not focused. That's covering your ass, right?
Right.
So and the art is picking just three for each function.
Right.
And everybody knows that three, and everybody knows that as long as he hits those metrics, be left alone to do his job. If he doesn't, then there's going to be a problem. And then it's just about reevaluating those metrics. So I call that like building a machine. And we did that in 2006. We had metrics for how to open stores, so on and so forth. And that worked fine. We had 20% growth. Building the metrics and the systems are hard. But it looked like we were standing still. So investors like, we're not opening stores. We're not confident. And then from 2007 onwards, we started growing 20%. Boom, boom. Oh, you guys are doing great. Working so hard. Like that. Actually, no. I was racing mountain bikes. Yeah, I got pretty good at it. That's how little I worked. Because we were no longer building the machines. We were just turning the dials. That's a lot easier.
Right.
But in COVID, falling off a cliff, build a new machine. And that's where the essential.
Yeah, and one of the things that I was impressed with is that you've used data to really drive merchandise mix in your stores. Can you give us a little bit of an overview of what you've been doing and what are some of the learnings from that?
Yeah, so we did a so the essential we're pivoting to essentials, right? And we think there's a lift of like 40% of sales, which is a massive number.
Yeah.
That what that does to a retail business is just massive. You grow your addressable market by 50%. Anyway, but okay, what do you sell? What price? How do you make space for it? It's probably one of the hardest. It's the hardest analytics part. So first you have to marry your data with Nielsen's data, because you got to compare it. You're not doing well selling essentials, so you have to look at other people. And then that in itself is just a nightmarish exercise. Many products you don't have barcodes, or retailers don't use them or whatever. That took a lot longer. And then there's analyzing it. So you figure out metrics. So we figured the most useful one is gross profit dollars, liter of shelf space. And then you have to figure out how to roll it out. And we're using we're working with a company that uses variable planograms to net lending. And there, I believe in 10 years, won't be a retailer who doesn't use variable planograms. They're AI powered and all of that stuff. And I mean, they were doing it long before. So they do a company in the US, companies in Australia. But we're the only convenience. And I don't think, and that's one of the other things we discussed. You know, if everybody's been using that, this is the only company I know of that does that. Well, how is the guy with 50 stores, 10 stores going to get access to variable planograms?
Right.
They're gonna talk to them, not because they don't like them, but because you don't want to integrate with, you know, 90,000 single store chains and goes to a sales site. But if all the data was sitting somewhere, yeah, they could have at it, right? And you know, looking at your state of the industry, like comparing that to my Nielsen exercise, right? Huh? But what are you going to do with category level data?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I'm falling behind. Okay, maybe my margins are low. Okay, what should I do? Doesn't say what SKU, what size,
Right.
labor. So I think there's a lot of benefit, and this is why I think Max can do so much, and that's why I joined the expo. I wouldn't be here if Conexxus weren't around and Max wasn't doing this type of stuff. What am I going to do at the lobby? I'm not even allowed to come to
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. Because you're an out of country exec, you can't go up on Capitol Hill. You can wave at it, but you can't go up on it, right? So you brought up an interesting question about, or an interesting topic about data clarity and data depth. So if I were to take that comment back, I would say, okay, we've got to go far deeper than category, subcategory data. We've got to get down to how the UPCs underneath each subcategory are interplaying and some of their elasticities. And you're using a company that kind of calculates that stuff and can project halo benefits and price elasticities. Is that where you think we need to really start focusing? Is how we get deeper into that and how we can start comparing that with our peers and the manufacturer's own data?
Well, I think that you know, with AI and so on, analyzing data is easier and easier. But if you don't have data, then you get left behind. That's by people that do. And right now, if you're as a smaller operator, you may have data. But you know, there are only so many ways of looking at retail data.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think that, and that's what I was just driving at. I think with the consolidation, somebody's going to consolidate this industry because it doesn't make sense. And since it's so difficult to do from a logistics standpoint, it makes sense to do from a tech standpoint. And that's data, that's product acquisition, that's a super app, that's a data lake, where you can have all these algos have at it, right? And tell you what to do. So
and then from that
who's going to
acquisition
step
point,
into that breach? Yeah.
yeah, and that from that acquisition point, as you said, you can also now start rolling in what happens when they're online, when they're on their mobile device, and all the way back through. And seems to me at that point you start having that consumer data that the CPGs are actually looking for.
Yes, yes. Except that as a yes, and maybe the largest companies in the US, largest C-store operators can. But I think that also brings up another point, is that even if you did, if you tried to get the manufacturers to pay you for it, it would come out of your trade. And I know that because we tried, and we're 70%. It would still come out of our trade budget. It's only when, and we were told by that company that we're dealing with that was talking to manufacturers that no, the manufacturers will only give you marketing, will only take dollars from YouTube and Facebook if there are many of you. If you're a single guy, it's coming out of your trade budget. So it's not
Right.
free money. And that's why, again, there's this role for this consolidator.
So yeah, there's
Going
yeah,
to be
there's
us, it's going to be somebody else.
yeah. So what you pointed out is that there's two budgets, and trade is relatively fixed and finite, but marketing is not, and that's where we need to tap.
Yes, look at Amazon. What is it? Retail media, $40 billion. 90% of it going to Amazon. Walmart gets 10, but that's expected to double every 2 years or something like that. So
and that's because they've got the online presence where they actually know what every click you're doing. Whereas our challenge is we need to know where you went in the store and so forth. They're doing the virtual side of what we need to do within the physical space of tracking
yes,
customers.
and I'll give you an example of somebody who tried to aggregate it here, but globally, Facebook, Meta, before they got distracted by the metaverse. We were one of the companies among, there were 10 around the world, but the other one was Walmart, and they didn't say what the others were, but they would show a coupon on your feed from some FMCG when you were near a store. And then when you use the coupon, well, they were able to charge the manufacturer however much more for that sale, because they could prove a sale happened.
Right.
We were doing really well until COVID happened and the metaverse.
Hey, so we're getting close to time, and I think we're
Yeah.
getting close to your bedtime, and I got to go to work sometime today. If you had, what would be your one message to the folks that are watching right now as to what you'd like to accomplish and how that ties into where you think the industry ought to go this year?
I think what I'd like to accomplish is to just kind of move the ball along on True Age, which I talked about in the speech. It's the start of a platform. And I think you can see where the pieces might fall with 8112s and a data lake. We call it the flywheel triangle, right? That'd take a few hours of discussion. Yeah, we would welcome, love questions on that.
Will do.
Yeah, we think that I do think that there is an opportunity for the industry to get together and create value for everybody, for themselves, for the customers, for the suppliers, stakeholders. And if they don't, somebody else will.
So it's us getting together as an industry within antitrust bounds. Yeah,
yes.
to create scale that we don't have today.
Yes, to create value. Yes.
Great value.
Create value by scale. No. You can think of them as standards also, in a way. It's very similar.
Well, I'd also like to point out that you're the only chairman I've ever worked with that could actually write HTML.
That's you. I'm not sure I can write HTML.
Are you working on Python yet?
It's beyond my pay grade.
All right. Well, Victor, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to talk to us. Conexxus really appreciates all the support and how we can work together to further your agenda of making us data kings in the retail space. That's kind of been our objective as well. So looking forward to seeing you in the future, and thanks for talking to us.
Thank you, Greg. Always a pleasure.